Hi, third graders. Today in reading, we're going to revisit a skill that is good to do when you're reading all the time that we learned in the very beginning of the year. So our goal for today is students will be able to correctly perform a comprehension check after reading part of a text. So the key words there, what we're really learning on and focusing on today is a comprehension check. That means you're reading a chunk. So if you're finding that it's hard for you to remember what you read after you read a long part, like maybe a whole chapter, you might want to modify this task by doing it every couple pages, doing it after one page. And then as you get better at the comprehension check, you could add on more pages and work your way up to doing it after a whole chapter. So if you're finding this is tricky for you, break it down into smaller bits and then adding on more as you go. Make sure you're getting the answers correctly. So what is a comprehension check? You might not remember. We'll go over that on the next slide. So, readers understand a story by giving themselves a comprehension check. And when you give yourself a comprehension check, you ask yourself 3 questions. First, you say, who is in this part? And the answers to that question should be character names. After you can list all the characters who are in the part, you're going to answer the question, what just happened? When you ask this question, you're thinking about the big events of the story. So you definitely want to start with the biggest events first, the most important things that happen. Remember, picture back to when we would step over all those little details. And then after you picked out the biggest, most important things, then you could add some smaller important details in there as well. So who was in this part? What just happened? And then the last question, third question you're going to answer is, does this fit? So think of it like a puzzle piece that they show right here. Does this fit with something that already happened, or is this new? So these are the 3 really important questions to the comprehension check. Now, if you answer any of these incorrectly, or you're not able to even come up with the answer, you don't keep reading, right? So this is why it's super important. You give yourself this comprehension check so that you make sure that you understand what you've read so far. And then once you understand what you've read, then you're able to go on to the next part and keep reading more. We know that as good readers, we don't want to keep reading if we're not understanding something. So if you fail the comprehension check, no worries. You just go back and you reread again. So you go back into the text and you look for the answer. Who's in the part? I forgot. I'm not sure. Go back and actually look, right? So I'm going to show you step by step how to do the comprehension check with Tales of a Fourth Grade Nothing, Chapter 5. And then you're going to reread our chapter for the week, which is Chapter 6. You can either listen to Miss Christina reading it, you can read it in your new packet, or you can read it on the online PDF version that I'll attach to this. So plenty of ways to read it. You're going to read Chapter 6, and then you're going to do a comprehension check. You can either do your comprehension check by recording yourself talking, should be like thorough answers to each of these questions, or you're going to type them the same way that I am on these next 3 slides in a student template. So thinking back to Chapter 5. Chapter 5 was, let's think about what it was called, the birthday bash, right? So Chapter 5 was Fudge's birthday party. So now we're going to go on and I'm going to show you how to answer these 3 questions, thinking that if I wasn't able to answer any of them, I would not keep reading. I would stop and go back and find the answers. And I am going to use the book. There's nothing wrong with using the book. So definitely use the book to make your answers better. So number 1, who is in this part? Off the top of my head, I definitely knew that Fudge, because it was his birthday party, right? So I'm going to type and keep looking back into the text, all the characters that are in this part. The most important ones, of course, right? So we have Fudge. Peter was in this part. He's the narrator of the story, right? He tells us everything that happens. Peter's mom was in this story. This part of the story, Chapter 5. Peter's grandma was a big part. Grandma was a big part of this chapter. And then his birthday party was all about those 3 guests and kind of the chaos they all caused. So we had the 3 guests, which were Jenny, Ralph, and Sam. Peter's dad showed up at the very end. We could add him, but he barely had anything to do with this chapter, right? So who was in this part? You would want to make sure that you went back and found out. You were able to list all these people: Fudge, Peter, Mom, Grandma, Jenny, Ralph, Sam, Dad. They all really played a role in this chapter. So now I have checked off. I've completed this step. Now I'm able to go on to question number 2. What just happened? So this is where it gets to be a little trickier. And remember that you really want to focus on the big events. So the big event that this whole chapter was about was Fudge's birthday party. And for this, we could make some bullet point notes, or if you want, you could write a paragraph. So I could say, Fudge's birthday party. And I could say, what happened in the story in the chapter 5, we saw the setup of the party, the actual party, and then what happened after the party. So we could say like the party. And then, so that was like one big main summary of the chapter. And now I could go back and add some more details that I still think are important to include in this what just happened to show that I really understand the purpose of this chapter, right? So during the setup of the party, Peter was just kind of telling us they were blowing up balloons and they were getting napkins ready and all those kinds of things. So those are kind of details that we could step over, not super important. But at the party, what was really important were the guests, right? So we could say Fudge's guests. We could say Jenny, and in parentheses, what was really important about her was that she bites. And we could say Ralph, and it wasn't very kind, but what Peter was focusing on about Ralph was that he was overweight and eats a lot, right? So we could say eats. And Sam, what he was focusing on about Sam was that Sam cried a lot. So Fudge's guests, Jenny, Ralph, and Sam, they're biting, they're eating a lot, and they're crying a lot. So then this kind of all goes again with that idea of chaos and Fudge being a problem for Peter, right? Because Peter was very involved in the party. So we could also add a quick little last note that Peter had to help throughout the whole party. Okay, so let's stop and think. We're going to reread our notes. What just happened? So in chapter 5, what just happened? Fudge's birthday party is what the whole chapter was about. Went through the setup of the party, the actual party, and then the party aftermath. Fudge's guests showed a lot of big action during this part, right? So Jenny, she was biting, Ralph was eating, Sam was crying. It was just a mess. The whole party was a mess. And then another big idea of what just happened was that Peter had to help throughout the whole party. So this information, these details really sum up what just happened in chapter 5. So check off who was in this part, what just happened, and now we're ready to go on to the third part, where you really think deeply about how all of these things fit together. And now we ask ourselves, does this fit? So what just happened? Does that fit with something that already happened, or is it new? And sometimes you might think that it might be both. So I think that what just happened, which basically is the chaotic party and Peter being really involved and having to take a lot of responsibility for that, fits with what has already happened, because like an underlying recurring theme that keeps happening over and over again in this book is that Fudge is a problem for Peter, right? He told us that in chapter 1. My biggest problem is my little brother Fudge. And something big keeps happening in every chapter that shows that Fudge is a problem for Peter. And this birthday party was like that too. So I would definitely say that it fits in that way. We could say that it's new just because the event, the actual birthday party, was something new, right? So we can kind of say both, but the idea of the events, like what happened, if we're really analyzing it, definitely fits with the theme of Fudge being annoying to Peter, right? So I'm going to say, and this one I'm going to answer again. We could do bullet point notes as long as you're completely getting your ideas across. You could voice record, or you could type it out in sentences. That's what I'm going to do for this one. Remember to restate the question, and remember, go back in the text. You should be saying words that are right from the text and things that are related. I've had the book open the whole time. I made notes before I started even this video. So really, really have the text with you and be looking at it and be pulling ideas right from the text. You guys know that we do so much work with text evidence. It shouldn't all just be coming from your memory. So let's see. Does this fit with something that already happened, or is it new? This part fits the idea that Fudge is Peter's biggest problem. Fudge is always, and I'm going to explain why, right? Fudge is always annoying Peter, and this birthday party caused Peter to be annoyed even more. We would say this part was new because of the birthday party event. Right before we had seen them at the park, we've seen that at home, but this birthday party really was new. But I would say overall, if you're thinking about like you're analyzing it and the ideas about the story, it definitely fits. The main idea being that Fudge annoys Peter, right? So just to reread our writing, we always want to reread our writing and make sure it makes sense. We read the question again. Does this fit with something that already happened or is it new? This part fits with the idea that Fudge is Peter's biggest problem. Fudge is always annoying Peter, and this birthday party caused Peter to be annoyed even more. You can add on more details to that too, right? Because of the balloons popping, the biting, all that. This part was new because of the birthday party event. Just added on that little detail as well, right? So now we have successfully completed the comprehension check, and we would be ready to go on to read the next part. Remember, if you can't answer the questions, you can't keep reading because you're not going to know what's happening, and you need to know what's happening. You need to understand what you're reading in order to keep going. So one last time, remember today and every day when you read, make sure to stop and think after a small part or a bigger part, like a chapter, and give yourself a comprehension check. 3 questions. If you can't answer the questions correctly, go back and reread to find the answers. This is going to make sure that you're really understanding the story and you're being a really great reader with your habits. So now it's your turn. You're going to go back to Seesaw and edit the template to submit your comprehension check. Make sure you read chapter 6 first. Obviously, you're doing this with a different chapter than I did, and I can't wait to see what you guys come up with. Have a great day.